Hi everybody, this is Anne. Over the course of my pottery journey, I've thrown quite a few mugs and developed my own throwing style. In this video, I'll pass along some of my best advice to anybody who's just starting out with throwing. I always begin with clay that's been wedged well. I slam it down on the bat as close to center as I can until it's stuck tight. To begin, I wet my hands and I use the palm of my left hand for support along the side of the mound. I use the bottom of my right hand over top of the mound to push straight down with. Now the right hand does most of the work. I slowly move the palm of my hand down over the side until it touches the bat. I always have a little bit of clay at the bottom that I just can't seem to center, so I cheat and remove it with my fingers. Now I'm about 80% centered. To get it to that 100%, I'm going to cone it upward. I wet my hands again and use the palms against my fingers to squeeze the mound gently so the clay rises between my hands. As I'm doing this, I'm checking for air bubbles and checking that the moisture of the clay is consistent. If it's too dry, I can add more water to the clay at this point. To cone down, again I wet my hands and then I use the palm of my right hand to push the clay down and over the side until my palm touches the bat. Be careful not to introduce air into the mound as the clay descends. And there's that clay ring again at the bottom. Again, I just remove it and clean up the bat with my sponge. I use my thumbs to hollow out the center. I push straight down, making sure I leave 1/4 inch depth along the floor. Next, I push the walls outward. Always open the walls a little wider than your final width. This is so important because I need the extra width at the bottom to be able to pull the walls up and inward. This will make more sense as I start to pull up the walls. I make sure to compress the floor well to help avoid cracking. One thing I learned from day one was to double check the floor depth before I pull up the walls. I still do this to avoid any problems with cracking as it dries. If it's too thick, I continue to compress the clay down. If it's too thin, don't try to salvage it, just start over. There, that's about 1/4 inch, that looks great. Oh, also, don't forget to smooth over the hole. Now you'll notice that there's a bulk of clay along the walls that are already present. You can't start pulling from the bottom until you thin that out. If you skip this step, your mug will be top-heavy and eventually twist and collapse. I put my hands on either side of the wall 1/4 of the way down and squeeze that mound up and inward, making sure the walls don't become too thin either. It's important that you keep the walls at that inward angle to maintain control over the form as it gets taller. If I tried to pull the walls straight up, it would eventually bulge out and collapse. Here I'm compressing the rim of the mug to keep it from getting too thin. Now I can begin pulling the walls from the bottom. First I create a channel at the bottom with my finger. This pushes the excess clay off the bat, plus, as you can see, it begins to narrow the diameter of the mug floor. I wet my fingers and place them on either side of the mug, touching my thumbs together for support. Then I squeeze the clay upward and inward. I continue until I get all the way to the top, but making sure not to squeeze the rim anymore. I don't want that area to get too thin. I still have more clay at the bottom, so I pull up again. This time I used my sponge to create the channel, and I made sure I got the bulk of the clay off of the bat for this last pull. Notice that the bottom diameter of the mug is again shrinking, but because I pulled the floor wider when I opened it up, I have room to pull up and inward. Now I repeat the steps to pull up the walls. As this is the last pull, I'm also adding a little shape to the mug by pushing the clay outward a bit in the center, and then I pushed it back inward at the top. I used my wooden rib to refine the shape and begin smoothing the clay. I used my red rib to smooth the clay even more on the outside and then the inside. I also used my fingers to smooth and round the rim of the mug. I use a wooden stick to trim the foot from the bat. I still have some ridges in my mug, so I wet it back down again with a sponge. Then I used my metal rib to smooth it out. I'll probably go over it one more time to get rid of the rest of the rings. Later, when the body of the mug was more rigid or leather hard, I created a handle and let it dry a little so it was close to the same dryness as the body. I scored the handle end and placed this well under the rim in that natural recessed area. This serves two purposes. By placing it in the recess, the handle plays to the natural design of the mug. Also, by placing it down away from the rim, the chance of warping the rim decreases. Now, you don't have to place the handle that far down on your mug, but aesthetically, I thought it made the most sense on this particular design. I've had trouble in the past with the weight of the handle pulling on the rim during the firing, thus causing it to warp. I also score, slip, and attach the bottom of the handle. I like to make sure the handle is straight and that it does not extend out too far from the mug. I really like to make sure the connections are secure by adding a little extra coil of clay along the joints and working them in. On the bottom, I thumb around the edge for a nice smooth foot. Finally, I use a wet brush around the joints to smooth out the clay and remove fingerprints and what Jim calls the schmutz. Now here it is with the new handle. I'll put this on the shelf and cover it with plastic so it'll dry slowly. Of course, all clay is different, and your stoneware may not be as finicky as this porcelain when it comes to warping and cracking. I'll advise you to pay attention to the problem areas as you throw your clay so you can always be creatively problem solving. Happy throwing! Thanks to the newest members of our research facility team. And if you'd like to support our work, click on the Super Thanks or the Buy Me a Coffee link. In any case, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time in the studio.